Got it.
I'm
Yep.
working on getting a schedule going, and we're live now, so I'm just
Okay.
setting up right now. But yeah, I'm working on getting a schedule, so we'll get that going eventually, and have like a set day and time. I go live every single day or every week or whatever. But
Very good. Very good. Yeah.
yeah,
Excellent.
we are live. Awesome. And let me put this into Facebook and everything to promote this. But Neal, thanks for coming on the show today. I keep saying show because it's not. I don't think of it as a show, but I guess it is one because it's regular nowadays. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
tell us a little more about you and what your business is and what you do, how you work with clients.
Yeah. Well, thanks first and foremost for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. As we mentioned before we went live, this is my first live stream, so forgive me if I'm a little giddy on the idea of doing a live stream. But so yeah, I run a business growth consulting advisory firm here out of Houston, Texas, and we focus almost exclusively on helping organizations become very, very proficient at selling. So whether you're a startup organization without a sales team at this point, and you're a founder who is looking to develop a path to market, we can help you figure that out and help you not only figure out the strategy, but build some early success and some early wins for you by helping you to really understand how to get your first customer on board. And we also work a lot with companies that are in that 20 to 40 million dollar space as well, that are looking to figure out if they've got possibility and headroom for growth. And so a lot of these owners get into it, and enthusiasm drives their business for a long period of time, and they hire some salespeople, and they have marginal success, in some cases good success, but they're looking to turn that up and take it to another level. And we help organizations figure out, A, first and foremost, what are the roadblocks, and then B, let's get those all out of the way, remove them, and get them on the path to figuring out how they, as a particular company, can do better and drive more revenue, profitable revenue, back into their companies.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. And so, as you're working with folks, I mean, what are the top three challenges you find that folks hire you to overcome?
Yeah, they a lot of cases, particularly more established companies will, they'll be to a point where, they generally are doing pretty well. They generally understand the markets that they play in, and they generally have gotten to a point where, they're fairly happy with the revenue. But then they get to, and then they look at it and say, well, and they begin looking around at their environment and their competitors, and they say, well, we probably should be growing a bit faster than we are. So they dig into it, and they can't really uncover, and they try different things, but they really can't uncover the magic formula for getting the company back to growth. So we typically, they're looking at, usually there are three main things that we typically are helping them look at. The first one is the people that they have in the organization. Do they have a sales team? Do they have a strong sales leader? Are those individuals contributing to the overall culture of growth in the firm? Are they doing the right things consistently to drive repeatable selling success? And then the second thing we're looking at are really the processes they're using. Do they have a documented sales strategy? Do they have a well-defined process to be able to identify, target, and engage with customers? Do they have processes that track along with the way their buyers want to be buying from them? And then the third thing we're really looking at is the tool set that they have in play. Sales stack today is, from just a technology standpoint, if you look at Nancy Yardine's technology stack, that thing grows dramatically every year. You can't even put it on a single slide anymore because it's just littered with sales technologies, and a lot of them are really, really good. So what technologies are they using? What tools do they have at their disposal? Do they even have a tool? Do they even have the right tools to be, take something as simple as when you're making phone calls outbound, do they have the right voicemail messages that generate callbacks, for an example? Very simple, very straightforward, but very critical to a salesperson's daily job is to get people engaged and start conversations. And if you're not doing that well, then inevitably, we can help you do that better. So really the people, process, and tools are the things that, we try to look at and make sure that all of those things are working in conjunction with one another to effectively drive higher growth rates and more revenue back to the company.
Definitely, no, that's great. So there are folks, a lot of folks who are be watching this call are pretty much they're a lot of small business owners, that kind of thing, small and medium business owners.
Yeah.
And for folks like that who are, I know you mentioned the higher grossing folks are typically the folks you work with, but as these people are positioning themselves and growing their sales organizations to get to the point where they can be at that level, what are some things you advise them to do in terms of like building a sales process from the ground up?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the first thing you really need to do is investigate, how, the people that you're trying to talk to about your particular product or service. You need to understand ultimately how they buy, right? Let's assume that you do have a product or service that is valuable in the marketplace. Let's assume that you've identified the right people to be engaging. I think that from a sales process standpoint, you really have to first and foremost understand how your clients like to buy the product and the service that you're selling, because we as salespeople, oftentimes we can't really influence the buying cycle very effectively. We can see certain points of it and help customers, complete certain parts of that journey faster maybe. But the overall buying process, we really can't change. We have to understand it from the client standpoint, and we've got to facilitate as much as we can our part of that buying process, right, as the salesperson. So first and foremost, figure out what the clients buy, how the clients buy, what their buying process looks like, and make sure that you are an active participant in that, and that you're making it easier for them to execute their buying process. The second thing I think you need to look at from an overall process standpoint is make sure you understand where your process intersects with theirs, and make sure you've got the right things to measure. So if I don't have a process that's well defined from a stage gate standpoint, if I don't know, for an example, when I move from the first part of my second process to the second part of my process, and it's not really well defined, meaning I do A, B, and C, and the client does A, B, and C in response. If I know, for an example, if I build a consistent process that always includes those steps, when I'm done with those steps and I check them off, and then the client checks their part off, then I know I move from stage one in my process to this next stage in my process, which tells me I'm moving forward and I'm making progress with the client. So make sure you have a good stage gate process as well, and that those stage gates are really well defined and they're consistent in working with the clients you work with, so that you personally know how close to the sale you're actually getting. And you can measure that objectively versus sort of a subjective, I feel pretty good about this opportunity. I feel they give me all the right signals, but you haven't really stepped through the objectivity of making sure that those actual things have happened already. So those are a couple of things to think about when you're building a sales process and making sure you have those things in place.
That's great. I think those are huge, because a lot of people don't even think about those sales stage gates as they're building their business as they're starting out. So that's a great tool, a great tip. How is business, if at all? I mean, I don't really know from your perspective, but as far as you work with clients, how much has business changed given the way the last year has gone with COVID and everything like that, with the pandemic and quarantining and whatnot? Has sales changed at all? Has it been affected? Have the cycles been shifted at all, or are you seeing kind of just pretty much business as usual?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think, maybe there's not a holistic answer to it. Maybe there's not an answer that applies to everybody in this regard. But a lot of the clients we work with are, quite a few of them might have been fielding a relatively heavily weighted outside sales team, for an example. They had most of their sales resources built into a set of resources that would be out generating face-to-face conversations. They would be out making, direct sales calls on the individuals that they're trying to sell to. They were focused on, setting 2 to 3, face-to-face meetings a day. And then they were driving a selling process through that face-to-face interaction, and through the ability to develop the rapport with somebody sitting across the table. Now, obviously, when COVID hit in early March, everything came to a screeching halt in that regard. Almost everybody sat back for at least the first couple of months and said, well, we're not going to see anybody at this point, whether they were concerned about the virus and, because we didn't really know to the extent of how dangerous the virus was at that point, whether it was because, we don't want to take the legal risk of bringing somebody in and either giving them the virus or them giving us the virus, all sorts of things going through people's mind, which was probably the right thing to do because, again, none of us knew very much at that point. But nonetheless, a screeching halt was placed on face-to-face sales meetings. Now, what ended up happening over the course of that, 6 months that followed was that, a lot of companies were very slow to go back to that model. A lot of companies decided that, they didn't want to do face-to-face meetings. A lot of companies, as you know, haven't even pulled people back to the office fully at this point yet. So me as an outside sales rep, I have a lot fewer opportunities for me to engage with somebody in a face-to-face manner, right? It's just the nature of what's happened. And so what's that ended up doing is it's made owners think about, for an example, their model first and foremost. What's the model of selling that I need to take into the future? Should I be fielding outside sales reps alone? Why should I field an outside sales rep if they can have, 15% of the meetings they used to be able to have, for an example? Is that resource still going to be valuable? And should I really invest the capital in an outside sales resource? I think a lot of people are thinking about that. We've worked with a lot of people thinking through that for at least for 2021 as they plan their budgets and they look at their staff. Another thing is, if I was an outside sales rep, for an example, and I've had to really by default function more, I did function more as an inside salesperson. What do I need to do? Was I as good, were my skill sets as developed, working behind the screen as they were in-person meetings? So how's my writing? Can I write effective and efficient and clear emails? We've kind of lost that art a little bit. How's my ability to engage on the phone, right? Can I mirror somebody's tone? Can I understand what they mean through not only the words they're saying, but the tone of their voice? How do I get really good at making, calls to people where, I'm great sitting in front of you, but the phone is a completely different dynamic because I lose 50% of the communication medium, which is me and you sitting across the table, me reading your body language, et cetera. How do I really get good at using tools like, Zoom and the digital platforms where, we're face to face, we're talking, but it's not the same, right? It doesn't facilitate the same level of intimacy and communication that a face to face meeting does. So all these things I'm thinking about as an outside sales rep. Now I've got to shift my focus, and my skill sets that I was previously, developing and really good at, I may not be the same skill sets that I need to take into the new year. So I've been going through a process with clients and with individual salespeople to say, all right, let's step back a little bit. Are we as good at the skill set that we really need to be good at, which is going to be a lot more virtual oriented than it is going to be in face to face, I think, even for the foreseeable future. So we've had those conversations. And we're looking at investments with clients and trying to determine what the makeup of their sales team really ought to be looking like. So I guess a long-winded answer is yes. I mean, it's quite a bit different for people who are running sales teams, who are engaging in the marketplace and trying to find the clearest path to their next client.
Gotcha. No, I mean, I think it's a necessary long-winded answer because, like you said, it's not like a one size fits all for everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of considerations that go into those kind of things. So, I mean, as you make those kind of jumps, as you're talking with clients about making that shift for them from the in-person sales to the online and Zoom based conversations with
Mm-hmm.
potential clients, what are a couple of shifts you recommend people to make, or what are some tips you could give them for making that kind of a shift for themselves?
Yeah, it's a good question, and again, we've had a lot of these conversations. I think part of it is, first and foremost, it always starts with your attitude, right? Start with the right attitudes that drive the behavior. So, we've often sent times, I think, up until recently, people saw the inside sales job as somewhat of a lesser sales job than an outside sales role, right? Meaning that those people maybe weren't as skilled or they weren't as capable. I think that's changed, right? I don't think that's the case anymore. And I think it's that trend had been changing, I think, anyway, but COVID really sped that up, right? Where, no longer is the ability to sell from behind this computer screen and behind the phone seen as a lesser job, right? So take the mindset. If you were in outside sales before, don't look at all this inside activity as, hey, I signed up to be this outside sales guy, jumping on planes, having, fancy dinners, being at the golf course. Don't see that process as a bit of a demotion from what you were doing, right? See it as just shifting a little bit of the way I sell and getting in the right mindset to say, look, this is really important for my company. It's really important for me, really important for my clients. And, even if I never get back, to having, a weekly golf outing with my clients, then I'm going to figure out other ways to engage them, remotely. I'm going to figure out other ways to be of value to them. I'm going to figure out other ways to maybe enjoy our time together. And, and so sales reps are figuring that part of it out, right? How can we do some of that virtually, even though, it doesn't look the same and doesn't feel the same. So get the mindset right and realize that, you still can add incredible value, maybe even in some cases more value by being in front of a computer. The second thing is really think about, from an attitude standpoint, is think about your workload, right? No longer is a 3 meetings a day going to be a sufficient metric to measure yourself on, right? Because now that I've taken travel out of the equation, now that I've taken, lunches, a lot of these long lunches out of the equation, I mean, it's great for a lot of us because, man, we have a lot more time at our disposal, right? Instead of having, 3 meetings a day, I can easily have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 meetings a day, right? If I plan them correctly and I do them well. So, so there's a lot of ability, or there's a lot of need for you to shift your mindset from saying, okay, what is a successful day look like in selling now that I'm virtual versus, trying to compare it to a day, when I used to be in the field, right? And sometimes it's hard to make that shift because, we're going from, again, a very successful day outside doesn't look like the same successful day inside, right? So that's another thing related to mindset. Get that mindset correct. And then some of the skills, like I said, some of the things we need to develop, right? It's we talk about everything from, take a look at our backgrounds, for an example, when you're doing sales meetings with clients, right? Get your background correct on Zoom. Should you have a, how do you get your background right? Right. Should it be, should you be more casual and not have a screen background? Should you, I've got one, you don't, for an example, right? We're not in a sales meeting, but what does that mean? Does it, so we got to think about things like that, but also, you've got to think about, you don't have the same level of body language, even though you and I can see each other via Zoom, we really can't read each other's body language very effectively. So, if you think about tone of your voice, you think about the way you're speaking, you've got to get better at mirroring and engaging people, via these tools, and making sure that, when you're building rapport, you can't rely anymore on that kind of face-to-face interaction. So you got to develop your skills that build rapport, based more on the words that you say, in the tone of the voice and the volume that you use, versus where you used to be able to use a lot more of your softer skills around your body language. And then, reading, writing, you've got to be able to interpret quickly. You've got to be able to write better. You've got to make sure that, the volume work that you're doing is, personalized and not, because when I was meeting you face to face, that by default is personal, right? Now that I'm not meeting you face to face, it's a lot more difficult to make things as personal as they used to be. So what are some of the other techniques and tools we need to personalize? Using the person's name a lot, asking lots of good questions, making sure that you spend time slowing down and making sure that you're engaging them on things related to their business, their market, their company, their personal, view of all that. So those are things we need to think about as well. But it's tough. It's not an easy shift for a lot of people to make. And I still think there are a lot of salespeople who are struggling with it.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something. You mentioned the mindset a couple of times, and I think that's one of the biggest shifts, right? It's just like getting out of your head about it.
Mm-hmm.
You can sit there and be in your head about it and complain about, okay, well, things are so different right now. I can't possibly do what I did before now,
Mm-hmm.
right? Without everything being so different. And you can throw your hands in the air and give up, right? Or you can adapt and figure out ways to adapt. And like you said, consider different perspectives and try different things out and see what works. For example, you gave the example about the background. So I'm curious what your thoughts are in the background, because I've heard mixed reviews, right? In terms of having a green screen and the background with your company name. And some people said it's more authentic or whatever. So, I have my thoughts on it, but I'm curious what you think about it.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't know if I've placed a lot of thought into it. I do think, in some cases, having a background, does maybe distract a little less. But it certainly isn't as personable either, right? I do think that there's some personalization that happens, and there probably is a bit of rapport that you're missing when you're doing, like me, for an example. Well, I've got a green screen background versus where, you have more of an authentic, background. So, I don't know if there's a right answer. I think it might largely depend too on, the state of the relationship that you have potentially. And again, we're referring to a sales meeting, if mostly, but if you're doing a sales meeting and, it's the first time you're ever meeting the person, you may decide to do one thing. And then after you build a little bit more rapport with the person, you might do something else. There were there were plenty of stories where, there were certain CEOs, for an example, that would place fake pictures and, fake things around their office because they'd love salespeople to come in and say, hey, is that your sailfish on the wall, right? And so even though it wasn't theirs, they would see this kind of technique. And I mean, do we see that, for an example? I look around your room and your picture there and try to, hey, I see, you've got that book up in your corner there. Tell me a little bit about it, right? Now, is that real rapport or sort of a salesperson's, attempt at rapport? I really don't know, but I think, and you just have to think through it. I don't know if there's a right answer. I do think that there's more intimacy without a background. There's probably a little, maybe there's less distractions with a background. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, my thoughts on it are, I mean, because I've had conversations with people, I talk about this stuff all the time, probably too much. I'm on Zoom way too much.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think we all are, right? But I've had conversations about this, and I think you're right. I think, it really depends. And I think talking with some folks about being strategic about it, some people, depending on who they are, it might be better to have that background, have the green screen up, and kind of have a professional background. And then folks who you may have more in common with, you have to have this stuff in the background showing, in your actual room, so that people can build that rapport. Like, oh, that's really cool. You have that thing there. I have that too. Or, I love that concept, or whatever, depending on what you're trying to go for, what the motif you're trying to go for is, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think you're right there. I think it totally depends. But that's great. So where's the line, I guess, or, might be, I don't know, line might be a strong word, but what's the point in a business where a business owner's, doing X amount of stuff on their own, right? And then they're like, you know what, I really need to bring in Neal. I need to bring in to see what Neal can do for me here, because I've done as much as I can do with my skill set, with my knowledge, with my abilities. I need to bring in someone like Neal to come in and help me to move that next, 30-40% in growth and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that most people get to that point when they've exhausted multiple options, when they've tried different things. Very rarely, I think, will someone come to me who said, look, I haven't really done anything yet. I really don't, know what to do, other than, again, set aside kind of the startup who's, thinking through these things on a daily basis, right? What's the next move, right? But, the established businesses that have been doing this for a while, if they feel like, they're growing at the rate that they want to be growing at, if they feel like, they've got a good team, if they feel like, that there is they're kind of at least at pace with the market, and they're at least at pace with their peer companies. Oftentimes they don't reach out to somebody like me because they really don't see the need, right? They don't really see the benefit. And investing in a company like mine isn't inexpensive, right? There's a fairly healthy investment that a company needs to make in order to do that. And that investment needs to be, based on the fact that they've got some, either they've got some, future pain that they're seeing, and they want to make sure that future pain is avoided, or they've got a whole lot of current pain that they're trying to get themselves out of. Those are typically the people that reach out to me and need some help. Not that they're failing, and not that they're not doing a great job. It's just, but they've got to feel the pinch and be in enough distress to say, I need somebody to potentially look at what we're doing here. I need somebody to help us assess it. I need someone to build some support into our current program. And I need someone who, isn't going to, it's not going to need to be 90, 120 days out before we get some help, because, I want to address this issue now. So being sort of an instant on resource as a consultant and as a business growth driver really allows people to make relatively rapid decisions once they get to that point and they're ready to pull the trigger. So, so the people, like I said, that look for people like me, or look for somebody like me, are people that have been trying multiple things and nothing's quite worked, and they're sort of at their the end of their experimental rope, and they're trying to find someone who might have some new ideas.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So in the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned a couple of things about tools, right? And like some tools that you think people, sales folks can use. What are some of your favorite tools that you think folks might benefit from investigating in terms of things that they can do for themselves or their businesses?
Well, clearly you need a customer relationship management tool if you're not using one. I think most people are. I mean, if you look at the data, I'm not sure, if I believe that there's that high of a percentage that people that aren't using it, but you really need to have a CRM system to be able to organize and track your client interactions, a system that nudges you to do the right things on a daily basis, that's beyond a calendar, a system that can help you prioritize where the key activities are, a system that allows you to make sure that if there is a consideration between doing task A and task B, which one's going to be the most valuable and which one has the biggest payoff, to focus on first. CRM will really help you with all those things. So you really need to have that in place and be able to build on it. Then of course, most sales teams and salespeople struggle and fall down in the prospecting part of what it is they're doing, for an example. So they're simply not prospecting enough to start those conversations and find people who want to engage, and hence their pipelines are relatively slow in growing, if they're growing at all. And so tools for prospecting, right, are going to be critical. So some tools that I really like, for an example, if you're not using LinkedIn for prospecting, then you're probably missing a fairly valuable platform to find the people that you want to engage with. But and you'll have people debating this, but I like automation on LinkedIn, particularly as it relates to connecting with people. Maybe not so much automation when it comes to getting conversations starting, but when it comes to connecting, I think automation is good and it can be used effectively. So tools like Duck Soup or Octopus, I've really enjoyed because they've really helped me connect to a lot more people in my network and build that network over time. And it allowed me to at least build that path to being able to contact you directly by using those types of tools. So those types of automated tools for LinkedIn, Seamless AI, for an example, is really good when it comes to, targeting your marketplace and making sure that you've got, consistent access to customer databases. Zoom Info, I also like to use Seamless AI and Zoom, but two data platforms that will really help you drive, building the right lists of people to go out and talk to, right? And you can slice and dice those lists very, very, in a very, very fine way, so that, I can basically target somebody, 3 miles from my office, that has a revenue of, $10 million or below, and has, 5 people in their sales organization, right? I can do those things really, really easily with those types of tools. So definitely, if you have the ability to latch onto those tools, do so. Also, I like email automation as well. When we talk about automation, I know people will argue, hey, don't send bulk emails because people don't look at them, they don't read them. But I think it all depends on the message and what you're trying to accomplish. So I do like some level of automation with email. So tools like AutoClose, for an example, which is now a VanillaSoft company, just recently bought by VanillaSoft, but AutoClose is a really good email automation platform that I really like to use. So those are some tools that I think from a selling, and these are all tools to help me in the prospecting phase of what I'm doing. There's a whole lot more, once I get people into the opportunity funnel, et cetera. But again, I think if people can prospect better, they can manage their funnels easier.
Awesome. That's awesome. Well, Neal, thanks so much for coming out, man, and for talking to us today.
Yeah.
How do folks get in touch with you? What do you prefer? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
You can reach out to me, find me on LinkedIn, Neal Benedict. It's pretty easy to find me. My company here in both sides of the screen, Silverbrick Sales Solutions, and we didn't talk about it, but I'm also a licensed Sandler trainer. So I teach people in the Sandler methodology, both leadership and individual salespeople. So you can find me again on LinkedIn pretty easily, Neal Benedict, or you can reach out to me at my email, neal.benedict@silverbricksolutions with an S, one word.com, or my number here, 281-771-2876. I'm happy to connect with you in any way that you want. And I'm usually pretty good at getting back to people if they have some questions that they just want to throw at me. So.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'll throw all that stuff in the description below, so folks have that information for you, so they can reach out to you through the description if they want to. But Neal, like I said, thanks so much again for coming out, for being here today to answer some questions.
Happy to.
Everyone, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell if you want to get notified of future videos, and feel free to leave a comment below. Let us know what you thought about the live stream. And if you have questions for Neal, please reach out to Neal. He's, like I said, he's available for questions and consults as he's available. So thanks again, guys. Take care and stay safe.